It's a pretty common belief out there, especially in internet land, that LS3 powered Corvettes are the most desirable, and if you're in the market for a C6 Corvette, you really should hold out for a 2008 through 2013 to make sure you get one with the LS3 engine. I'm calling BS on that right now because it is a fact that the C6 ZR1 with its supercharged 6.2 liter LS9 engine cranking out 638 horsepower is the most powerful C6 Corvette ever made, and that's enough horsepower to run the quarter mile in about 11.2 seconds at 130 miles per hour. The problem is they don't give away C6 ZR1s unless you bring a wheelbarrow full of cash, and when you count all of that cash, it better equal close to $100,000. So if you have $100,000 to spend on a C6, then I would highly advise you go ahead and pick up the C6 ZR1. For the other 95% or so of us out there, including myself, let's move on to the next most powerful and capable C6 ever made, and that's the C6 Z06. The C6 Z06 has the mighty 7-liter LS7 engine that cranks out 505 horsepower, and if you drive that C6 Z06 to the track and run it down the quarter mile, they're probably going to hand you a time slip that says something like 11.5 seconds at 125 miles per hour. The good news is that the C6 Z06 costs about half as much as the ZR1, which means you should be able to find a decent specimen for around 50 grand. The bad news is that the LS7 engine is fairly exotic and it can be very expensive to repair or rebuild, and it also takes extra specialized skills above and beyond what is necessary to rebuild a regular LS engine. This is due to the fact that there's several exotic parts in the engine, including titanium connecting rods, titanium intake valves and retainers, and hollow sodium-filled exhaust valves, as well as several other goodies. The second bit of bad news out there with the LS7 engine is that there are reliability issues that are well documented that I don't 100% understand, but many out there believe, and some unfortunately have experienced, that these engines pose an unreasonable risk over time of dropping a valve, which can unfortunately lead to catastrophic engine damage.
It was now time to remove the heads. As we pulled them off, we realized that Isaac had one of them. So the engine is obviously toast.
Complicating this is the fact that these cars are now at least 11 years old, and it's hard to know for sure if the Z06 you're interested in has had its cylinder heads fixed or not, and if so, who did the repair, and did they do the repair correctly or not. Now normally this might not be that big of a deal, but since the LS7 engines are so expensive, if yours was to suffer catastrophic damage, that would be a major size dent to your pocketbook. Now to be 100% crystal clear, in my opinion, the C6 Z06 is a beast and an incredibly capable sports car, but due to the fact that it has this uncertainty and the expense surrounding its cylinder heads, I would pass on one for now, unless you know for sure that it's been repaired and which shop did the repairs and that you trust them 100%. Okay, so the ZR1 cost $100,000 and the C6 Z06 has kind of unique reliability issues that could lead to catastrophic damage. So what is a C6 buyer to do? Well, your remaining choice is between the most produced version of the C6, which is the underappreciated, in my opinion, LS2 variant, or the second most produced variant of the C6, which is the LS3. And in my view, you really can't go wrong with either one. Now I can hear some of you guys thinking out there right now that my numbers must be wrong because the LS2 version was only produced for the first 3 years of the C6's 9-year production run, but you have to remember times were horrible in the end of the 2000s, so bad in fact that GM even filed for bankruptcy in 2009, and many consumers tightened up their pocketbook. So against that economic backdrop, looking at the production numbers, you can clearly see that C6 production was very front-end loaded, with the majority of cars being built in those first 3 years. Anyway, with all of that having been said, if your plans for your C6 call for supercharging it somewhere down the road, then you probably do want to go with an LS3 powered variant due to the fact that they take a little bit better to supercharging, and if you go with the manual transmission, it is a bit stronger than the one that's offered in the 2007 and older C6s. If, however, your plans do not call for supercharging or other major horsepower upgrades, and you want to save quite a chunk of money, then here are my top 5 reasons to go with an LS2 powered C6 from 2005 to 2007. First, as mentioned, the 2005 through 2007 LS2 variant of the C6 is the most produced, so these are the years you're most likely going to be able to find with many of the options that you're looking for, and likely for several $1,000s less than an LS3 variant for differences that the vast majority of owners would never notice. Reason number 2, 2005 C6 Corvettes are known to have the weakest rear differentials of all of the C6 Corvette years, and now that sounds like a really horrible thing. However, that doesn't mean that they're weak, it just means they're not as strong for serious racing and performance applications as the later year differentials. And that having been said, not every C6 owner is into pushing the limits of their C6 Corvette. Some simply just like the looks, and they're more interested in the cruising and the car show aspects of this great hobby. And so if that happens to be you, the 2005's weaker differential won't likely matter at all, except for the fact that your wallet is likely to be quite a bit thicker than the rest of ours because of all of the money that you saved. Reason number 3, C6s with LS2s and manual transmissions typically put down about 350 horsepower to the rear tires on the dyno, and the LS3 cars, again with the manual transmission, typically put down about 380 horsepower to the same rear tires. Now in the scheme of things, if you look at all of the engines the various C6s came with, that's a pretty minor difference, and only the most sophisticated butt dynos would ever be able to notice. And in my experience, the LS2 variants typically sell for about $5,000 less than their younger LS3 siblings. So if 350 rear wheel horsepower is good enough for you, then you can potentially save a few grand by buying one with the LS2 under the hood. Oh, and if you're worried that you might miss that extra 30 horsepower now or at some point in the future, then relax, because you can erase most of that 30 horsepower difference by simply bolting on a fast LSXR 102 intake manifold. Now this is because the vendor that supplied GM with the manifolds for the LS2 used a newer and likely cheaper process, which ultimately turned out to be inferior from a performance standpoint when making the intake manifolds. Now I think GM figured this out as well, because the predecessor manifold, which was essentially the LS6 intake manifold on the last years of the C5, it flowed quite well, and of course it is well known that the LS3 intake manifold, it flows very well also. The fast LSXR 102 intake manifold is known by many to be one of the best bolt-on upgrades for LS2 powered C6s. It provides somewhere around 20 horsepower through a wide range of RPMs and close to 29 foot-pounds of torque, which brings it very close to the numbers that the LS3 puts out. The best part is it only takes a few hours to bolt on, and of course after the installation it should be tuned to make sure you're getting all of the available horsepower. Reason number 4, all Corvettes have relatively low production numbers, especially when compared to other models of cars that GM makes. And as these cars age, some of the parts quickly are no longer available from GM, and many times not even from the aftermarket. This is where the automotive recyclers come in, as C6s are destroyed through the years because of accidents or theft joyrides or floods. The parts are valuable, so the cars are typically sold at auction, where companies like VetNuts, for example, will buy the cars, they'll disassemble it and store just about everything inside until it's needed on the used market. You can go to the VetNuts website, and many of the parts are sold on eBay as well. As the years go by and your C6 ages, if you have a part that fails that's not available through GM or the aftermarket, you're most likely going to be able to find that part if the production numbers for those years were the highest. In this case, that's mainly going to be the 2005 through 2007 LS2 powered C6s. And finally, reason number 5, there is a certain sense of pleasure one gets when racing with an underdog engine like the LS2 against a savvy C6 owner with an LS3 under the hood and beating them. For some that might be kind of petty and not worth much, but to me, it's worth quite a bit. And besides, I like the challenge. So what do you guys think? Have I totally lost my mind, or do I make some valid points? I have a feeling I might get lit up a little bit for this one, but that's okay. Let's hash it out in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that thumbs up below. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And most of all, thanks for watching.